Welcome back, folks, and tonight we're going to be talking about the Great Cattle Raid at Cooley. This really is the focal point in the Ulster cycle, and really a big focal part in Chulaann's life. And as battles go, it's the earliest known battle written down in the history of Western Europe. Earlier than that, you'll have to go to the Middle East, Greece, Turkey, to find written down battles. And while we were talking about that area, it was early Greek and Roman scouts who remarked about the cattle in Ireland and the size of the cattle and the bulls. And to have a bull in ancient times was to have great wealth. Now today we hoard money, gold. And while in those days they hoarded gold too, jewels. And to have the best bull in Ireland, if not the known world, was to be almost king-like. Now this great battle starts in Samhain, Halloween as we know it today. And it also started at a time of the Great Pangs of Ulster. Now this was supposed to be a curse or a spell on the Ulster men. However, to me, this is a time of year when the warriors all would have got together to feast. And it's more likely that they were probably poisoned or their food was tampered with and they get sick. Now this left the young Hound of Ulster alone to face one of the biggest armies ever to be rose in Ireland. Now over in Connacht you have a queen called Queen Maeve, and she's quite ruthless, and she coveted wealth more than anything, more than her husband, more than her family. And her husband just happened to own a great white bull. So looking to compete with him, she had to have the great brown bull of Cooley, the best bull in Ireland. The only problem was, this bull was in Ulster. So she sent her men to bargain for the bull. Didn't work. The bull was not for sale. So she sent her people again, but this time she said, if they won't give it to me, take it. But getting when something was up, the bull was moved. Now, there's a bit of contention about where it was moved to. Was it Slievegallion? Or was it Slievegallion? It wouldn't make sense to hide it in Slievegallion. This is too close to Cooley, too close to where the army was heading. So it probably made more sense to hide it over in Slievegallion in County Derry, right in the heart of Ulster. We also have to remember at this stage, there was the Black Pig Dyke. Now this was an earthworks that ran from east to west. And really the only gaps in it were over in Armagh or County Louth. And a bit like when King Leonidas faced the Persians. This great army that Maeve was rising to take over Ulster was going to be channeled into a very small gap. And that's where they'd meet Chulainn. Now at this stage everybody had heard of Chulainn. He had carried out some magnificent feats and they had won quite a few battles. But I don't think everybody's paying attention. Maybe they thought he was just a young boy. But it was obvious that the likes of Maeve and others had that great a contempt for the Ulster men that they weren't paying enough attention. Now there are several books that cover this, and a lot of them delve into more magic and mythology, and others sort of stick to the original text. But at the start, which I'm not going to go into much detail, the start really just is about the Queen Maeve assembling her army, which included Fergus MacRoy, the brother of King Conor of Ulster. But at this stage he'd been exiled. And it details in the books and the early texts how this great army moved from Connacht eastwards towards Armagh, towards the hills of Cooley in County Louth. And knowing that the Ulster warriors were struck down, they thought they were going to have an easy time to go over, take the bull, and take over Ulster. But young Chulainn didn't succumb to the pangs of Ulster. And as the army made its way across from west to east, Chulainn terrorised them. Picked off men, picked off scouts, set traps, done everything he could to slow them down. And in one of his raids he met Maeve's son, cut his head off, and shook it in front of the army like a prize, taunting the entire host of Connacht, Leinster and Munster. No fear. No fear in this man at all. Or when I say man, little more than the boy. And the army finally reached the east, close to the bull, and close to Maha and Armagh. But this is where Chulainn would meet them, and this is where Chulainn would fight them for days. They may have made a camp here, sending out their scouts, sending out troops to try and find Chulainn, but every time, the young hound got them, killed them, and stalked Maeve. It's said that throughout this entire time, whenever he got the chance, from a distance he'd be slinging stones at Maeve from a slingshot, hoping to get her off guard. Now at this stage, yes, Maeve sent some men out to look for the bull, and after ravaging the Cooley Mountains and not finding the bull, she sent some of her army deep into Ulster. And with the rest of the army still at the main camp, and close to fjord and river, an army needs water at the end of the day, Chulainn invoked single combat. And we're talking about days where vows actually meant something. And it's at this point where the tactical advantage is with Chulainn, and he knows it. He's not a stupid warrior. He's well trained, plays chess. He knows he has got them where he needs them to be. Now that single combat had been invoked, somebody had to speak to Chulainn. So Fergus MacRoy was sent. And really he was like a father to Chulainn. And when they met at the fjord, Fergus asked him to turn away. And this is the ultimate shame for Chulainn. But they made a pact that day, that Chulainn would turn his back as long as Fergus would do the same in the future. And it was this pact that had a great impact on the outcome of this battle. After that then came one of the adopted sons of Maeve. Now Fergus must have had a liking to the boy, because he asked Chulainn not to kill him. But the young boy came to Chulainn and was bold and brave and taunted Chulainn. Taunted Chulainn to the point where he simply cut him in two. And as Fergus was leaving, he left with Maeve's adopted son, simply flagging away like a cut sausage in the back of his chariot. So Maeve began to feel a wee bit sort of aggrieved here. The hound had killed hundreds of her men as she advanced across Ireland. And the first two champions who'd went towards Chulainn hadn't killed him. So she sent for one of her best heroes. So next to face the hound was Nacrantil, a renowned warrior from East Connacht. And he arrived to face Chulainn with 9 spears made of holly. That's all he thought it would take to kill this young pup. But as he fired the spears, Chulainn simply leapt up in the air and, remembering his training, landed on the tip of each spear, glided all the way down again every time he jumped. Now the warrior was left with no arms after this. That's all he'd brought was the spears. So he left the battle and came back the next day with his armour and a wee bit more ammunition. But nonetheless, when they fought, like the man before, Chulainn split him in two. At this stage, Maeve began to think, this young pup has a bit more bite to him. And like many times during this battle, when Chulainn stood true to his word, appeared at the ford every day to fight single combat, Maeve sent some of her army up into Ulster, up to help the ones look for the bull, to raid some villages, to take some slaves, and it's said they even reached as far as Dalriada, up on the north coast. And they found the bull, but they couldn't move it too handy, so they had to get a load of heifers and start teasing this bull down the country, down towards Connacht. They're thinking what else to do. These champions that she sent already just were cut in half, like they were young children. But it's sure when one champion fell, another one had to come. So Maeve, getting a wee bit annoyed this time, thought she'd trick Chulainn. She'd try to calm him down with a maiden and offer him a new bride. And she sent this young maiden down to Chulainn, along with a guard dressed up as King Ella, her husband. But with the slingshot he killed the both of them. Chulainn was having none of it. Not so easily tricked. Now, as the story goes in these older texts, the youth troop, the youth corps, over them in Maha and Armagh, they'd assembled and they'd heard about Chulainn standing facing the entire host of Ireland. And seeing that the older warriors were still in the pangs, they thought they'd join the fight. They'd go and they'd help Chulainn. And they assembled. and they charged the Connacht men. These young boys were no match for battle-hardened soldiers from Connacht, and they were no Cuchullans. Worried a wee bit now that Cuchulainn might find out that these boys had just been slaughtered, may have wanted to move the venue for the battle, for the single combat. It's very close to where the boys had died, and she didn't want Cuchulainn hurrying off and finding them, because that would put the real anger on him, put the real fury, the battle halo over his head, and he'd be unstoppable. But Cuchulainn didn't agree to this, so she sought a bit of a truce, probably so she could cover up what she'd just done. Next up to battle Cuchulainn were 6 princes. They were Maeve's 6 princes, the 3 blacks of Imleach and the 3 reds of Slúzar. And all 6 of them just fell in front of the young hound. No match for him. One by one, the great heroes of Connacht, Leinster, Munster, all went before Cuchulainn, and they all fell. Maybe Maeve thought she could grind him down. Maybe to the point that was true. Cuchulainn, at the end of the day, was just a man, despite all the different mythologies that have sprouted up over the years. He was a mortal man. How much could one man take? Well, Maeve was just about to find out. Word then got to Cuchulainn that a warrior called Furbeth was to come and fight him. So Cuchulainn sent word to Furbeth, will he come over and speak to him? Both of them had trained in Scythia, and both of them had their old bonds to remember. But when they met, Furbeth rescinded all bonds of friendship from Cuchulainn. That rightly angered Cuchulainn. He is a man of his word at the end of the day. And picking up one of the holly spears that was through Cuchulainn earlier, Furbeth threw it at Cuchulainn, and it went through his foot. A wee bit even more pissed off at this, Cuchulainn pulled out the spear and returned it. When he returned it through Furbeth's head. Now after this there were ambush attempts from Cuchulainn. He even battled one of the Morrigan. He was said to be a ship-shifting witch. Though I think as time went on, the mythologies got added in very heavily here, and more than likely that the different animals that they were describing were different fighting techniques that the Morrigan used. But nonetheless, Cuchulainn still stood. Now after all the ambush attempts and fighting the Morrigan, Cuchulainn did take a rest. Now some say that he slept for 3 days and 3 nights while Lugh from the Tuatha Dé Danann came and fought in his place. But for sure at this stage, Cuchulainn had been fighting for days. But there were some signs of the Ulster men starting to rise again, and Cuchulainn's plan of keeping them near the fjord was maybe going to work. So the single combat continued, and in between this, Cuchulainn chased away after breakaway troops, still survived many ambush attempts. He even went into Ulster to save some villages close by that were getting attacked. And finally came the day when Ferdia, a would-be brother for Cuchulainn, would join the fight. But he didn't join the battle too willingly. He wasn't there to start. He didn't join the great march from Connacht over to Louth. He wasn't there when the warriors were getting hacked down in front of Cuchulainn in single combat. And he wasn't there when Cuchulainn was getting ambushed. But Queen Maeve poisoned his mind. She mocked him that he was weaker than Cuchulainn, and promised him great riches if he had killed the hound. Even promised him her daughter. But everybody knew the friendship of Cuchulainn, and knew this friendship was deep. And I'm sure it pained Cuchulainn knowing that Ferdia was coming. The night before, it must have pained Ferdia too, because it said that he didn't sleep too well, and Cuchulainn spent that night with his wife. Next morning then, Ferdia he appeared at the fjord, but Cuchulainn wasn't there. Cuchulainn was still sitting back, thinking what to do. At this stage then, Ferdia's mind had been well poisoned by Maeve, so he started mocking Cuchulainn to his chariot man. But his chariot man had been in Scythia when the 2 boys were training, and he served as a charioteer and steward to Ferdia in several battles before this. But the charioteer seemed to be a bit annoyed at this, and he reminded Ferdia that it was Cuchulainn who slayed 100 German warriors to protect him. Now in these days that was 100 Vikings, early Vikings. And when they were training in Skissia, that Cohon had saved Ferdia's life several times. No, but a poisoned mind doesn't remember all these deeds. And Ferdia then thought to himself that if he'd remembered all this, he mightn't have came that day. And finally Cohon came. And the both of them met staring at each other. And they initially started performing their feats at each other. All the different skills that they'd learned when they were training away in Skissia. Then they fought with javelins, spears, they wrestled, they fought with swords. And in between this, they took some time out of the battle, they bathed each other, fed each other, and started fighting again. They were truly equally matched. Their swordplay was equal, their javelin throwing was equal, their wrestling was nearly equal. But there's one feat, one art of war that Cohon knew that Ferdia didn't, and that was the Gaebolga. And Ferdia knew that if that weapon came out, that he was surely to die. Now it was said that Ferdia had a very sturdy armour that couldn't be pierced with swords, but again you're delving into the mythology here. Finally it came to the time when Cohon had to use the Gaebolga to kill him, and when he released it into Ferdia's belly. And all the barbs instantly went through his body. But there's no celebration from Cohon here. He'd killed someone who was like a brother to him. And he went over to him and embraced him, cleaned him, and wrapped him. Now this Maeve had enough. That was her last throw of the dice in terms of single combat. She had no one else to go up against Cohon. So that was it. She was going to put the whole army of Ireland against the young hound. But the time had come in this battle that the Ulster men had started the muster. They were ready to join the fight. And they were coming. And you just imagine the Ulster men waking from this sickness or sleep or whatever had happened to them. They've been waking up to the sound of their women crying over the young boys who'd been slaughtered. Or the cries of others whose daughters and sons had been taken away for slaves in Connacht. Or hearing that the great bull was gone, or villages had been ruined. Hearing that Cohon stood alone against a whole horde of Ireland. And the Ulster men got up, and they rallied to him in Maha, and they rallied to Cohon. Now you might think one province against three others. There's only going to be one winner. There's nothing going to stop these Ulster men. These Ulster men were the most feared men in the world. I'm just going to recite as best I can some of the original text. Now this is as the Ulster men drew close to the battle. Fergus MacRoy, Conor's brother, was standing on top of a hill with King Allan. And Fergus was pointing out all the different heroes that were coming. Conall, Legler, Conor himself. And he said, "We will await them. We have warriors for them." "You'll need that," said Fergus. "For they'll not be found in Ireland, nor in the west of the world from Greece and Scythia, westward to the Orkneys, and on to the Pillars of Hercules, and to the Pillars of Brigham, and to the island of Gades, anyone who shall endure the Ulster men in their fury and in their rage." No truer words were spoken. So another great battle started. The Ulster men had hit this great army, and they cut through them like a hot knife through butter. But Fergus still fought for Queen Maeve, and he fought very well. He killed several Ulster men that day, nearly killed Conor himself. But at this, Cohon appeared again, and remembering the pact that they'd made at the fjord, Fergus turned and took his men with him. He left the battle. Fergus leaving meant that Queen Maeve was without her best hero and best warriors. Seeing this, and seeing the Ulster men ravage through her army, she began to retreat. At this stage she had the bull back in Connacht. She didn't have Ulster. But for now that would have to do. Now either unknown to Cohon, or he didn't care that the bull was gone, he guarded Queen Maeve's retreat back to Connacht. And more than able to kill her. More than able to take such brutal revenge on her. He guarded her back to Connacht. And like in our stories we hear of Cohon, it shows again this great humility that he had and respect for women. Meanwhile, the brown bull finally got to Connacht and was instantly met with the white bull White Bull was having none of it. So another great battle ensued between the two bulls. Now it's said at this time a great hound from Steve Gallen, where the brown bull was hid, had followed the bull into Connacht and tried to defend it. But in the battle, the brown bull had trampled Gallen, killed the hound. And the hound was actually taken back to Steve Gallen, buried there. And for quite some time the mountain was known as Gallen's Mountain. But at this, the brown bull returned back to Cooley, returned back to Ulster. Chulainn struck up a deal, a 7-year pact with Connacht that they won't fight each other. And you might be left thinking, what was it all for? Thousands of men had died. Friendships, brotherhoods, vows broken. Ireland torn apart greater than any time in its entire history. And for what? I love this story. The story of the young hound, and you take away the mythology, take away the magic, take away these wee add-ons that have been added on over the years in different fictional books. This is our Spartan moment, our Trojan moment. This is a period of Irish history which should never go unforgotten. And the front and centre of it was Chulainn, the Hound of Ulster. Now that was very condensed. Again, as I said, anybody watching these videos, go onto the internet and search for the Great Battle of Cooley and read the older texts. There are hundreds of pages there of stories. And next I'm going to do the more obscure stories. I said I'd do them next, but I'm going to do them after this and the death of Chulainn, because they sort of seem to fit a wee bit better. There's no doubt about it that after the Battle of Cooley, it sort of signalled the end of Chulainn. He knew that breaking that bond that was placed upon them in Scythia wasn't going to end well. So thanks for tuning in. And there's only a few days left now for the crowdfunding project, so if you are interested in hearing more of these stories and donating towards developing these stories into actual tours here in Ireland, hit the wee link which is going to be in the comments there somewhere, and you can make a small donation there. And until the next time, stay safe and I'll see you soon.